What is going on, everybody? Welcome on inside the 14 proven ways to crush it on TikTok. We're so excited for all of you to join us. If you're on the West Coast, good morning. Hope you have your coffee ready to roll here. And if you're on the East Coast, hopefully you've already had lunch and you're feeling good and you're ready to attack the rest of the afternoon. So excited. Been waiting for this all week long to break down this for all you fine, amazing people and really provide as much value as we can. You know, at STN, we have helped our clients gain millions and millions and millions of followers. We're in this stuff each and every day, and we want to be able to provide what we've learned through all the data and the analytics. And as I talk about data analytics, I have to bring on our lead man here at STN, the senior analytics lead, Jason Samuelson. Jason, on the West Coast, Kansas City, good morning, good afternoonish. How you doing, man?
Doing well, doing really well. Excited to go through these 14 proven ways. I think this is going to provide a lot of value for everyone that's on the call.
And Jason is a guy that is in this every day looking, how do we hack the algorithm? What's working, what's not working, competitive analysis, and really making sure our clients are doing well and that we as a company are providing the best possible best practices to our clients. So we're going to jump in, but before we jump in, stay tuned. I cannot wait to bring on two of my good friends in the industry. The VP of social media at ESPN, Kaitee Daley, will join us. Top 3 in followers and engagement on TikTok, no big deal. And then Overtime, Tom Weingarten is the Chief Growth Officer. They do about 1.7 billion video views, per month, I believe. So no big deal, just a bunch of heavy hitters that can share with you some best practices as well. So if you're ready, Jason, let's get into the first tip of the 14. And the first one is discoverability over followers. This is something that we constantly talk about inside the STN team, but also with all of our clients as well, that, you know, Jason, this platform really changed the game when it came to social media, where it's not really about how many followers you have, but the discoverability. We see some clients that have millions of followers and they may only get 900 views on a video if the audience is not enjoying it.
Right. It's so different than other platforms. We see Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all focusing so much on followers and having users determine what content they want to see. TikTok's really thrown that all out and decides what content you are going to see based on your behaviors, your engagement, your interactions. And as a brand account, you'll generally see 85 to 95% of your views will come from the For You page.
Yeah,
so for content that really is for that page is going to be the most successful for you.
Well, two things. A lot of you will probably agree that you're mostly on your For You page. Even though you follow a lot of brands, you usually don't, move over to the followed section. You just stay on For You because the algorithm is so good. And number two, at the end of the day, to kind of break it down in layman's terms, TikTok is seeding your video to a couple hundred, a couple thousand people very early on after you post. And if it's not getting engagement, not getting watch time, it's really, Jason, I guess I would call it making it not go to as many people and kind of turning down the gasoline on that engine.
Absolutely. And using the analytics to determine what is performing well for you early is going to be super important.
All right, let's go to number 2.
Segues us really well into number 2. The 2 most important metrics we've seen for all of our clients is watch time, the length that someone watches your video, and completion rate, the percentage of people that complete your video in its entirety. These 2 metrics, when they both perform over average, tend to increase the views you have on your content.
And again, I think these are the 2 main metrics that TikTok, whether they want to admit it or not, are looking at when they see that video in the first 10 to 15 minutes. So the first couple hundred people, is the watch time there? Is the completion rate there? If the first 100 people watch 90% of your video, you can guarantee they're going to put some gasoline on that fire and send it to more people. And also, just so you all know, I hope you guys are taking notes, but not to worry. If you registered for the webinar, we will send you this full deck so you can share it with your teams. All right, number 3, TikTok content. This is important, Jason, can be seen weeks or even months after it has been posted. This is why when we look at what we're going to be posting, honestly, across a lot of platforms these days, but for TikTok specifically, is it evergreen? Is it going to make sense when you're covering a live sporting event? Is this just like a halftime update? Or is this something, if I see it a week from now, will carry some momentum?
Marketers are forced to change their frame of mind with how TikTok's algorithm works. Generally, social media is known for being incredibly timely, but TikTok takes content that's weeks, even months late posted earlier, and they'll reserve that to users as long as they can. So that trending TikTok that you'll find that will do the best for your account tends to be evergreen, and doesn't matter if it's seen now or if it's seen a year from now. It still makes sense and it's still entertaining.
And we dealt with that a couple of years ago on Instagram. I remember, if you post a halftime graphic for an NFL team, you may see that 6 days later, and it's kind of annoying and doesn't really make sense. So, we, as the algorithms and as these platforms change, we change right along with it. All right, number 4.
Yes, number 4 is super interesting as we see overly produced content tends to underperform on the application. There's certainly times where it can work, but in the majority of cases, users are looking for content that feels really authentic to the application. When it's shot from an iPhone or a cell phone camera, we'll see that performance will actually do a lot better because users are usually the first thing they're served on this app is an ad that's really overly produced. And so generally they look to find content that doesn't meet that mold when they're looking to be entertained.
Also, there's a Q&A section at the bottom of this webinar. If you guys have any questions or want us to expand on anything, we'd be happy to help answer. But this is true. I've been saying this for years, and it'd be disingenuous if you were to put a radio commercial on television. So it's also disingenuous, in my opinion, to put a highly produced, linear-looking commercial on social media. It's just not how the audience wants to interact with content. So you really have to be authentic in those ways. Number 5, do not promote content, tease it. Jason, you see a lot of this stuff when you're digging into the analytics.
Absolutely. I think every single brand is looking to right off the bat promote their content as much as they can, ask you to buy their t-shirts, watch their sports, whatever it may be. But when you're joining this ecosystem that is social media, that is TikTok, and finding a way to join it authentically and make your content feel like it's a part of the conversation, not trying to start a new one, is really going to lead you to success.
All right, let's get into number 6, which is all about adding captions.
Yes, adding captions is so incredibly important for a couple of reasons. One, accessibility is become more and more important, giving users who are hard of hearing or deaf a chance to be able to engage with your content just as equally as someone else who can listen to the audio. But additionally, we find captions are a great way to convince people to watch longer. As you can see here, actually using captions in a couple different ways on the application allows people to move their eye around the video a little bit instead of swiping on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I remember Snapchat kind of started the game when it came to really, well-produced vertical storytelling, I feel like. And you noticed back then and you notice it now, this stuff is moving every second, whether it's a edit of the video where you're changing cameras or there's something on screen. When it comes to low attention span too, or you really have to make sure that something's moving on the screen every second to kind of keep that attention, keep that watch time and completion rate as well. We have a quick question from Kaitee about trending audio, and we have paid attention to number 9 because we're going to get into that as well. So let's move on to number 7. Utilize characters in the copy to maximize discoverability. This is huge. We know that Gen Z and people on the platform are using that search tab to say cool restaurants in San Diego, to say how to cut an avocado, whatever it may be, and utilizing now, Jason, I remember you told me this a couple months ago, a couple weeks ago, 2,200 characters now. You can put, people are writing blogs, as you see here on the right.
Absolutely. And you may think at the start of this, that's a small change that TikTok's making to their app. What does that matter? But we tend to see that these micro changes to the platform really relate to macro strategies their business is trying to achieve. So you taking advantage of them and utilizing them allows you one more way to convince someone to look at your application and maybe even make your video more searchable.
And this is no different than the Web 2.0, I guess you can say, when it comes to Google and SEO and tagging and hashtags. I think the more words, and they're looking at CRT, but they're also looking at captions. They're looking at all these things to make sure your video is going to be found in the future. All right, let's jump to number 8.
Absolutely, David. And on that note, TikTok has become a search engine for Gen Z. This is an article title I'm sure we've all read multiple times working in social media, but we really do see that users are starting to find these unique ways to use TikTok to find things that they're looking for. You can go on Google and look up the 10 best things to do in San Diego, but instead you can go to TikTok and actually see it and experience it in a unique and different way. And Gen Z really trusts this a lot more than they do just using a search engine like Google or Bing.
And it's just easier, right? I mean, rather than going to Google and clicking 7 different websites and you have to hear the whole story of like how somebody moved to San Diego, 17 years ago. And I just give me 60 seconds, give me video so you can entertain me and I can, ingest all this in 60 seconds rather than doing the homework. And I feel like this is just an easy way for you, everybody out there, to be able to use your captions. Make sure you're using the proper words in these captions as well to make sure people can stumble upon it, like in this example. Number 9, jump on trending sounds, but avoid licensed music. We've seen some recent, it used to be the Wild Wild West. We've seen some recent lawsuits from different music publishers. So you got to be careful out there. that you're not promoting your brand with popular music. However, if you're a user, if you're not a brand, absolutely, like that's how you play the game on TikTok. But Jason, we see trending sounds is something, if you jump on early, you really can, again, when you talk about gasoline that TikTok puts on your content, it helps immensely.
Absolutely. There's a ton of ways your content can be found. The For You page is one of them. But additionally, the search engine aspect, like we just talked about, in the same vein, being on a trending sound and having engaging content on that sound is incredibly important. And naturally, there's difficulties being using royalty-free music, but then you have to be a little more creative and be a little bit smarter about what you're using as a brand.
Absolutely. All right, going to number 10, humanizing your brand.
Absolutely. People go on social media to generally, they want to see content from other humans. They're not looking for your brand. So like we talk about, you're joining this ecosystem that is very micro creator focused and is very human in a way. So having that humanization of your brand and actually using familiar faces often is incredibly important if you want to be successful and connect with your audience.
This is a great example too, working with Queen. I mean, you think about Queen, the band, and how access to talent is difficult, but how can you create content? And this is an example of our very own Mary Page, a fan favorite here at STN, but being able to use content and talk to the audience in an authentic way. I'm going to talk to Kaitee Daley about this too over at ESPN, but Omar, who started House of Highlights and now is running the Sports Center, he has really become the face of the brand and people recognize him. They have a liking to him. And it really, I mean, on a platform like TikTok, it really plays really, really well as well. Number 11 is all about overstimulating users, is a great way to retain them longer. This is funny, Jason. I've seen recently, I think to get around some of the copyright rules or flags that users out there, just consumers I've seen cutting a lot of foam with a Family Guy clip and things like that. But, the way we've used this is, especially in sports, can you show a fan reaction on the bottom to a highlight? Or can you just find a couple different ways to showcase a moment in time? And this stuff is working really, really well on the platform right now.
Totally. And people think when it comes to original content, you have to be the one holding the phone or using the camera. But in this example here, we're taking two pieces of UGC and stitching them together to tell a better story for the user. So there's so many ways that you can create original content by using footage that you're just finding on the application.
Absolutely. We have a question in the chat here, so by Joshua Kelly, and this is the next tip. So I'll let you dive into it. All about, follower acquisition on paid. And how paid is working on the platform right now too.
Absolutely. Follower acquisition is incredibly affordable on TikTok. Talking to our paid experts here at STN, we're seeing that there's generally 50 to 70% lower costs when you're trying to acquire a follower compared to other major social media platforms. Generally, we talk about how followers don't necessarily give you the views
guarantee,
that
right.
on. Yeah, right. Exactly, David. Guarantee those views that we find on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. But the apps are ever changing, and who knows how followers play deeper into TikTok's algorithm in the future.
And then one question here is iPhone shot content better than produced content? And what we say to that, Joshua, is ultimately, if it works organically, it's going to work on paid. I think ultimately, or unfortunately, sometimes people think paid content is different than organic content. But if you can, the learnings that you can see from your organic content that's working, if you can mimic that and mirror that for your paid content, you'll see much, much better results because your audience is already telling you, hey, we love this type of content. So if you put money behind it, it's only going to get out to more and more eyeballs. Number 13, testing TikTok content is key to high deliverability. So I'm going to get into this more with the panel as well. But, being able to look at what's working with your audience, potentially deleting that post if it's not working, remixing content, things like that. This is going to go into our next and our last tip here as well, Jason, but really being a practitioner of your craft and playing with the algorithm, playing with the platform, it's so, so important.
Totally. And we find that on on a platform like TikTok, that you can create content that is super unique and can end up getting 1,000 views just depending on who sees it first. And so reposting that, changing it a little bit, making these small edits is a great way to continue to test your content. But in the end, the same people likely aren't going to see it. It's not this follower base where you're saying, oh, we're just serving the same content to them. It really depends on the masses.
And going back to that, Discoverability over followers. We saw like, that 3 to 6%, Jason, you probably agree when you come to Instagram and Twitter, like, okay, I know 3% of my audience is going to see this almost guaranteed. And we just know with the For You page, and even with Reels too, where it's just going to be more what comes up and what people are telling the platform that they're enjoying. The last and final tip, and I can't wait to bring on Kaitee and Tom from both ESPN and Overtime, respectfully. 14, this kind of goes into what we were just talking about, needing someone to own the TikTok lane. So at STN, when we're running TikTok for a lot of our clients, we have, one or two people that are really knee deep in the platform and testing content, understand the audience. This is why influencers that do really well on the platform do so well and their content plays so well, because they're constantly A/B testing their content on a daily, maybe even hourly basis. And I think it's so important. This just can't be yet another platform that you throw into your content calendar and kind of sprinkle content to see if it works. Really recommend having somebody that can be an expert within your organization that can play in the platform daily and be able to make those adjustments that really, Jason, can mean all the difference.
Right. Job requirements for social media managers continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so finding specialists that really understand these platforms individually is going to be the way you find success on the application, no doubt.
Awesome. So, Jason, you're the GOAT, as we all know. Thank you so much for your insight. And obviously, it's nice that all the hours and late nights and tears and all that stuff that, that you dug into all these analytics, it paid off with giving all the fans and users some amazing value. So we appreciate you, man.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
All right. So let's transition on to the panel edition of the webinar. So excited. When I thought of TikTok, I thought of success. I thought of who are two people in the industry that I know personally that would really provide a ton of value, that have a lot of gravitas and credibility. I thought of two people, and those two people said, David, I got you. So I can't, I'm just forever indebted to both of them. So I'm going to bring on Tom Weingarten. He's the Chief Growth Officer at Overtime. Their social channels boast over 46 million followers and garner 1.7 billion video views a month. Tom, no big deal there. And then Kaitee Daley, she's the Vice President of Social Media at ESPN. They are the #1 sports media publisher for engagement and top 3 on TikTok in terms of followers and engagement. Don't forget that. Tom, Kaitee, you guys are on the East Coast, so good afternoon. How we doing?
What's up, man? Good to see you. How's everything going?
Doing good. Kaitee, how are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having us.
Of course. Thank you so much for joining us, and we appreciate you guys taking time out of your busy schedules to provide some value for our community. So we're excited. I'm going to start off, and I'll start with you, Tom. Kind of an easy one here, but you just saw the 14 tips. And when you think of TikTok with Overtime, whether it's how it's performing or how it's really changed how you guys have approached social day to day, what's the first thing that comes to mind when somebody brings up TikTok for you guys?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for us is that it allows us to get our brand out there and allows us to connect with more fans and followers. Like for us, we've been around for like 5 or 6 years. It was really the first platform that we were able to start at like the same time as everyone else. Mm-hmm. Obviously, like we came around after Instagram and after Twitter had already been around. So with TikTok, it's like that first place where we can kind of like dive into. It aligns right with like our younger audience that we go after. So yeah, I think that those are the things that come to mind at first. A place where we can connect with just more of our audience that we've been building over the last few years.
I remember, Kaitee, we knew each other, I think, when you launched TikTok. You guys were super early. Like, you got buy-in from the powers that be, like, well, you need to go here now. And you guys were early on the platform. But you obviously believed in it early, and then how it's working now.
March of 2019, and kudos to ESPN leadership for their support throughout. For me, when I think about the ESPN brand on the platform, the 3 words come to mind: fan first, entertainment, which is the E in ESPN, and then relatability. And I think, and you spoke to this in your 14 tips, but putting things out there where fans feel like they could potentially see themselves in the content has been really successful. And it's not something that sports has always done, right? With traditional media, like the SE top 10 was reserved for mostly pro athletes. And I just look at this new iteration of what we're doing on TikTok as sort of like an always on top 10 that's engaging for everyone, that's relatable. And to your point about Omar and how instrumental he's been, he's like a new, sort of Stuart Scott, like pioneering different space in this different mechanism of content delivery to a very different audience. So yeah, it's been an adventure, but one that we've really enjoyed.
TikTok really reminds me of, this is probably 4 years ago now, but when Snapchat came out with the 24-hour story, very quickly Instagram copied, and then I think Slack had stories at everybody copied the 24-hour story. That was the new hip thing. I think the same thing goes for TikTok and vertical video storytelling. I think, IGTV tried to come out with it maybe a little earlier, and it didn't catch on as much, but the emergence of IG Reels and Facebook as well, and YouTube Shorts. TikTok came, the algorithm really worked really well, but how much is TikTok, Kaitee, for you guys parlayed just into other platforms you all manage?
I think that to start, it's been a platform where we're seeing a lot more, it's sort of that forced creativity, because lo-fi content, for lack of a better term, does so well. It opens up the door for that video first, vertical video first storytelling. And how do you potentially take that to a Reels, to a YouTube Shorts? We have a couple of brands that we started on TikTok because, no secret, most downloaded app last year, like clear sort of growth and momentum there. But also just that great like experimental testing ground for vertical video.
Tom, I know when we were talking, you just said like TikTok, in your opinion, is where things usually start. And you guys have kind of used that to your advantage to kind of test things and then like push it to other platforms.
Yeah, exactly. I think over the last year, like trying to develop more original content in different formats. Like we have all these different formats that we try to build. We start with them on TikTok, and it's kind of a testing ground because we feel like we have such a big audience there. Like we've had so much success there that if something's going to work, let's make it work on TikTok first and then see how it performs on the other platforms. Most times we have to make really slight changes. If it's going to go on YouTube Shorts, it's got to be a little bit different. If it's going to be on Reels, like how do we get more action in the beginning? So there's definitely little minor changes we make for each, but it starts on TikTok and figuring out like, okay, does our audience like it there? And if the answer is yes, a lot of times we feel like we can make the adjustments to make it work everywhere else.
Just to build on that really quick, because I think Tom said something really smart and important about like thinking about how a user is going to come across your content on different platforms. Like you mentioned, being more action first on Instagram. Keep in mind, like most of your users on Instagram are not necessarily sound on, right, when they're consuming. And that's just how their behavior started, with the platform being really visual photo first. Whereas on TikTok, like you are able to get like audio is such a big part of that experience.
I think before TikTok, the stat was something crazy. Like 60% of people watch video on mute across like Facebook, Instagram. Obviously, TikTok is more, you're definitely have the audio up. But yeah, if you're going to move it to Instagram, it better have more captions and things like that. I also saw a meme, and I'm sure you've all seen it in the industry, where it's like, I'm over 40. I'm not on TikTok. I just wait for a week for it to come on Instagram Reels. So that shows you about the idea of it starting on TikTok and making its way towards other platforms. Let's talk about UGC. User generated content, for those of you that don't know the acronym, but I think often people, they forget about the power of aggregation of content. Kaitee, you and I have always talked about this. No different than SportsCenter. What is SportsCenter? It was an aggregation of all the top sports plays and highlights for the day, and people can sit down, turn the TV on, and just tell me what happened. No different in the sports world and with ESPN on these different social media platforms. By sharing UGC and sharing what people are talking about, if you follow ESPN, if you follow SportsCenter, we'll keep you up to speed.
Yeah, in the same way that you can make a highlight read on linear really different depending on who's delivering it.
Yeah.
If you have like a, dry humor, or you're going to be very loud, like with TikTok and UGC, the team is putting a lot of thought into what's that text on screen, right? What's that hook? Someone had asked a question about clickbait, which definitely not a fan of that. Like if you're gonna tee it up,
pay it off.
Pay it off. And then the audio, how are you going to sync up the audio with the UGC moment so that it hits? How are you going to think about recirculation, which you touched on, the platform being super evergreen.
Yeah.
You can do things like find a great, for us, like great Marty Smith interview with Joe Burrow and bring that back when he was at LSU. Like now is a great time to bring that back. People will still enjoy that. And so anyway, I just think UGC tends to get not enough credit for being something like a palette where you can actually have your own artistic interpretation.
And Tom, I think you told me like 60% of your content is like UGC or UGC with your own spin, and 40% is original, something in that guard.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the page really. So we have, I think, like 21 or 22 different TikTok accounts, and each one has a little bit different breakdown. But on the main Overtime account, which is our biggest account and kind of all encompassing all sports, everything. It's probably about 60% UGC and then 40% more original. And I think it's been cool to build our TikTok audience that way, because a lot of times you got to be really specific, right? With your audience, and they like one thing and that's what crushes them, and everything else kind of feels like a little extra. It's been cool to see on TikTok. We've been lucky to kind of build that audience at the same time where they expect to see a little bit of both, and making sure that our original content actually leads into some UGC and vice versa, and that they're all connected in some different ways. So it's been cool to see on TikTok how we can have a breakdown of both and it still kind of work.
One thing really important to understand too about TikTok and really the discoverability of these platforms is when I'm scrolling, if it's an amazing high school dunk from the free throw line, I'm not sure if it's from Overtime and Tom, ESPN Sports Center and Kaitee, my friend reposted it. You know, you're not really looking at the logo in the bottom left corner, but you're more looking at the content. And if you can be that aggregator where you're consistently providing interesting, you know, Kaitee, you always talk about the feels, right? Like some type of emotion, whether I get excited, whether I shed a tear, whether it's heartwarming. But if you're that person for your followers that can deliver that, you're constantly going to get that engagement.
And I think it's important to have a conversation if you haven't launched on TikTok yet, as a brand, like how do you want your brand to show up? So for us, that was more heartwarming.
Yeah.
You know, we're not going to go into the like rowdy bar scene. We didn't feel like that was our DNA. So it's a lot of things that are more uplifting. And then to Tom's point, like if you're fortunate enough to work for a company that has the ability to have multiple accounts and brands, you can really start to think about that too. So our ESPN FC, our soccer account, does a lot of highlights. We're pretty heavy on highlights over UGC, and that works for that audience. That audience is really they gravitate toward that. So I think just kind of taking stock of how do you know what's your brand DNA, how do you want to show up, but how do you want to enter the platform and not come in so hot that you're a person at the party who only talks about yourself and you're not aware of, okay, how are other people at the party operating here? So that like trending audio, reading your comment section, understanding, you know, how fans are talking on the platform. I think that's probably one of the biggest mistakes brands make is joining and coming on a little too strong with like, here's what I want to achieve.
And again, I think we can learn so much from other mediums, whether it's radio and TV. Again, going back to the This Is SportsCenter ads, that wasn't like, watch us on SportsCenter every night, highlights, sports, da-da-da-da-da. It was just like, we're going to make you laugh. We're going to show you our personality. And then we hope that the hook here is going to be that you like us and want to watch us. But it wasn't hit you over the head with that call to action on those spots in particular. I want to, Kaitee, this really kind of geeked me out. I'll give credit where credit's due. Omar was on Gary Vee, I think on his podcast recently. I came across this clip where essentially, as we know, Omar runs a SportsCenter handle for you guys, does a ton of stuff for ESPN, but he was talking about how he consistently is remixing his content, how you guys at ESPN have really figured out really this ability where, for example, there was a video that I actually remember watching, why UFC fighters wear Vaseline. The first 4 times he posted it got about 1,000 views. He took it down from the platform, remixed it, changed a few things. That video now has 19 million views. So talk us through how you guys have learned to, in those first maybe 10 minutes or 30 minutes, you kind of know based on your guys' stats if this content's going to take off or not.
Yeah, I call Omar and his team like algorithm astrophysicists.
Yeah.
which
it's a science.
I think they secretly hate, but I just run with it. But no, credit to them. I mean, to one of your points, right, was about building up a team of people who really understand the space and can lock in up the space. And that's Omar, Dylan Anderson, Arthur Kogan, like give them all their flowers.
Yeah.
Because they study things at, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then what needs to change? How could we rework? Thinking about that hook, understanding that again, this is an algorithm. It may just be a slight thing that's tweaked that ultimately catches steam for you. So I would say a little bit of an athlete analogy, like shooters shoot.
Yeah.
Shoot your shot, even if you're having an off night.
And then Haley asked the question in the chat, are you physically removing the videos each time? The answer is yes, pulling it off the grid. I think he mentioned he knows within about an hour on TikTok, 10 minutes sometimes on IG and IG Reels, whether that's an official stat that he looks at. But yeah, kind of pulling it down, maybe adding a sticker that says wait for it, or maybe like just rearranging some of the scenes is pretty fascinating. But yeah, we've seen that as well, where for whatever reason, time of day, the TikTok algorithm just didn't play well that time. Being able to make some slight tweaks and repost it. Tom, for you, I'd love to hear from your guys' standpoint too. Have you noticed that as well? Well, I know this should be hitting, it's not hitting. Let's like try it a different way, and then you see success.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the fun of it is that, like, yes, we do all that stuff, but at the same time, I've had videos that tanked in the first hour, and then 5 days later, I'm like, oh wow, it like blew up. So like TikTok is definitely very fickle in that way. I think with our original content, we're much more likely to adjust and to change things versus like a UGC that we might add something to. And for those, we're specifically on TikTok, we're more like, get it up there, let's move on to the next thing. But for UGC, like, especially when we know that like it's a topic that works for our audience, or it has like a great hook or anything like that. I think that is the time where we're trying to adjust. Honestly, though, I think as we get to know TikTok more and more, we're lucky like having less of those moments where we're getting it right on the first time or on the second time and not having to make as many adjustments. So I think that's a big plus for our team, just living on the platform nonstop and starting to learn those things. But how long's the video? What's the hook? Like those are really the two things that I'm looking at. Like I'm obsessed with the first 3 seconds. Like it's all I think about all day long is like, what can that first 3 seconds look like? And that's usually going to determine the rest.
And again, just looking even anecdotally, if you look logistically as you're swiping through, I mean, you usually give a video about 2 to 3 seconds. And if it doesn't catch you, you keep on swiping. So that's why that hook, I mean, we saw that with YouTube with the cold open for the last decade. But that was more of a long format content. But I mean, TikTok in your phone vertical, and you're just doing this, so you better hook people early.
I just our audience is very similar to how I'm going to treat it, right? Like if I'm scrolling nonstop, the same thing like IG stories, like I just tap through if it's too many or whatever it is. Like on TikTok, like I'm scrolling nonstop, like so fast. If I'm doing it, there's a good chance that every other person is doing it the same exact way. So I think like for publishers, for people who work on TikTok, it's like, would you like this? Yes or no? Like I think that's probably the easiest first question to ask. And then you kind of go from there.
I mean, I got in the first 2 seconds, it said, guess how much Shannon Sharp's cardigan was at the Laker game. And I was in. Watch time was completed the entire video. I want to get into, I noticed for both of you, I look to the back end, I know both of you oversee so many accounts, but some of your brands on TikTok only live on TikTok. They may not have an Instagram or a Twitter or a YouTube. So I'll start with you, Tom. Do you look at TikTok as a training ground if you're going to try a sub brand or try a new community, and then see if it makes sense to invest resources and legs in other networks?
Yeah, we really look at it as like our starting point. A lot of the new accounts that we're making right now, they're like show pages for like micro pods, which what we call them. So like mini short form podcasts. So like every segment's like a minute or less, and we're trying some things out there. And we view it as like the starting ground for everything. So like we're going to start with this. If it really takes off, let's add another format to that TikTok account. If that is still blowing up, like, all right, now let's move it over to Instagram. If people are asking for a longer cut, now we might go into like a 15, 20 minute YouTube type podcast. So yes, to go back to your initial point, like we look at TikTok as, hey, we can start a brand on here and build it up, since it is probably the easiest platform right now to grow followers and to get some early engagement. People are just spending so much time on there that like, if we can crush it on there, it's going to be a little bit easier to get those same followers to go to find them on other platforms also, where vice versa, it's a little bit more challenging just because of how much harder it is to grow on the other ones.
No different, Katie, than how TV networks used to do focus groups. Like, let's test this out with the focus group and then we'll put it on prime time. But are you noticing that as well?
I think for us, I wouldn't say starting ground. We do have a couple brands that are TikTok only. I think for us, it just depends on what, and shout out to everyone who works in analytics and audience insights, Jason, the unsung heroes, right? Because if you're talking about, hey, we want to launch XYZ brand and we really want to reach women and we want to have like deeper connectivity, deeper conversation. Let's say we've been talking about this with our ESPNW brand, like how do we have deeper conversations and connections with that community? And so we've been talking a lot about Facebook groups and like, how do we, think about that for that brand, for that specific purpose? So I think, David, to go back to like width versus depth, if you're going for width right now and you're looking to kind of scale followers, definitely industry wise, TikTok's on fire. But the thing I love about working in this space is that all of the platforms do certain things really well. And you can, I always recommend like more of a portfolio strategy of, okay, I want to make sure I'm reaching this audience here by doing that. So for us, we have NHL and ESPN at Bat, which is our baseball, softball brand, on TikTok because we want to connect with younger fans there. We're serving hockey and baseball fans through ESPN and SportsCenter on Twitter, right? Because we have a huge following there and we're posting that type of content. And on TikTok, we weren't doing as much of that content from our main account. We weren't seeing it take off as much. So it really made sense for us to lean into those spaces. So sorry to hedge, but it's everything.
I love that. Going back to kind of the remix scene, I think this is so important. We've seen where, Katie, you and I talked about this too, where you might have a still that's a tweet is overlaid on it and then it goes into a UGC highlight. So just like finding creative ways to give the consumer all they need to know about the moment by even bringing over tweets or bringing on things from other networks to kind of create that remix of the moment.
Yeah. And pay attention to what the platforms are, in this case, for TikTok, what are they rolling out? So obviously if you spend time on TikTok, you've seen the, I call it carousel album style slideshow, whatever you want to call it. We just played around on ESPNW and did like Caitlin Clark is a walking record and showed a bunch of stats of how incredible she is. And anytime that they're testing something new, I think it's smart to get in there and test it as well and see how
well. And I always say this too, they never admit it, but when they roll out a new feature, they are juicing the algorithm for said feature. I've talked to everybody at the networks. They won't officially give me a green light, but TikTok now is the heir apparent to Be Real. So you can guarantee that they want to see that succeed if they're going to take the time and the money to invest in that type for the platform. You notice the same thing, Tom?
Yeah, for sure. If there's a new feature, even if there's a new platform, like you double down on it so heavily because they're trying to push it. You mentioned IGTV earlier. I think that was like the biggest proponent of that I've ever seen. But anytime there's a new feature, just try it. Like there's no harm in trying it. Like most of the time, like they're going to push it for only so long. So it's like, can you get some quick stuff out of it?
Haley in the chat here has a quick question. Like when you're incorporating faces for the brand you're creating for, are you using your own staff to feature, having the team send you content? I could speak from our standpoint, working with a lot of like our agency of record clients, literally STN staffers, like you saw there with Mary Page on the Queen account. She was the face of a fan and kind of being able to speak to that audience. And obviously, Katie with Omar and different people on your side, I know. Talk me through the talent, right? The TV talent, because I know Richard Jefferson, for instance, is doing amazing on the platform. You mentioned Laura Rutledge as well. You've had a lot of success. So how have you been able to use the TV talent to kind of bring over to TikTok?
Yeah, I think, first and foremost, they have to be game. They have to be willing to learn something new, try and experiment. And luckily for us, we have some people who are really willing to lean in. I think to Haley's question though about for like a brand account as opposed to a personal account, one thing I would say is I wouldn't have an over reliance on the physical face unless that helps your brand. Like if you look like Alex Earl and you're talking about face makeup, like, yes, that makes a lot of sense. In sports, I actually think the voiceover content and like having someone who's really good at storytelling and has the voice for that could be just as effective as
Off
someone
camera,
coming on green screen style, because in sports, there's so many great visuals. I don't know that you want to block a ton of the screen. This is just my take with someone's face. But again, if you're looking at like that person, if you're Washington Post and you're looking to have like a consistent storyteller that's appearing and taking you through things, then I think it makes sense. So to me, it just depends on the brand and the goal.
And Tom, you mentioned earlier, and I love your take on mini pods and things like that, but you've really internally raised up a lot of talent that can consistently provide that original content for you.
Yeah, I'm so pumped we had an Alex Earl reference on this. Yeah, so I mean, Overtime is kind of cross between the two. It's been cool. Basically, the short answer is anyone at Overtime can be talent now. It's kind of how we've looked at it. Like our social managers, people who have just ran accounts for years, we found that it's probably similar to the Omar method. Like they actually know the platform better than anyone, and they understand what needs to be made better than everyone. And now they don't have to be as much in front of the camera if they want to do more voiceover stuff, but they understand the editing. Like you don't need to be like this brilliant editor to do it. It's more of a social editor. So it's like all of these things have allowed for really anyone to be talent for us. But yeah, you mentioned the micropods, so just kind of like put that together. So, we saw that, like, again, we're a newer company. Like we didn't get into like podcasts when they first really started blowing up. Right. So instead of trying to get into that late, when we saw TikTok and like some of the things we're working on there, it was more like, how do we just create like a short form version of this specifically for TikTok? So we go into a studio and like, I only film for like 8 minutes and I get 8 videos out of it, 8 segments.
I've seen a lot of Tom content recently too. You're a talent as well.
I'm testing everything, whatever I can get.
I was about to say, he's the prime example.
Exactly.
Behind the scenes and now on camera.
Yeah. I like to be the permanent backup on camera person. Like we need to get in there. But so that's allowed us to just like throw as many different people, anyone who has a take, anyone who has an idea, different sports, culture, fashion. We have a Kicks account now, like anything that we can kind of dive in. It's so easy for us to bang those out and create so much content around it. And it's allowed our staff. And again, we do have our own internal talent. Like Overtime, Megan is our biggest example. Started as an intern, now has millions of followers just from making content on TikTok and other platforms. But then all the way to like, we have a social media manager who started 6 months ago and they have an awesome take on whatever they have a take on. And like, we throw them in the fire too. So if you understand social, if you fit Overtime's voice, we want to give everyone kind of that opportunity. And it's cool and it's fun because I think it makes everyone a little bit more prideful on what they're working on if they're in it in some way.
Kaitee, I'm going to double click on your, they need to be game, because we've noticed too, make sure it's a safe place, right? Because people in the comments can be mean. So just letting people know like, hey, if you're going to be talent or we're going to ask you to do something, people may say stuff in the comments. You have to have thick skin, I think, ultimately, to be talent facing. People that get into TV and they get into podcasting, I think they understand that. But if you're just asking maybe one of your colleagues, like, hey, can you do a quick TikTok? Just making sure they're ready for that as well.
I don't recommend walking up to any talent and just saying, hey, can you try this TikTok dance trend? Right? Because it doesn't come across as authentic as someone who's, hey, I've spent time on the platform. Like, can we work together on how I show up on the platform moving forward?
2 more questions, and I promise to get you guys back to it. But are there any other brand creators outside of your own brand that you'd like to follow or inspire you guys? Start with Kaitee.
Yeah, sure. I spend a lot of time on Toddler Talk because I'm a mom of a toddler. I think Emily Vondi is so talented at Vondi Fam. And I guess I get inspiration from people trying new features or people trying, I guess, different different ways to branch out from what they maybe originally started doing. But then also like she just, I call it recirced, but she just brought back a video that was really I think her most viewed video in 2022. And I was like, that's so smart. Like, of course, why wouldn't you do that? Like, bring it back and talk about in green screen and be like, oh, since this happened, right? Like bring people along in your journey. And I know that's something Omar is really great about doing too. So, I like to switch it up. I've mentioned this before, like I have multiple different accounts because depending on what you engage with when you first
Yeah.
platform, your For You is going to look really different. So in one of my accounts, I'm really active in women's sports. And I would not have known there was a dance championship taking place at Disney's Wide World of Sports complex. There's so much going on in sports all the time. And so something came up in my For You and I dropped it to the team in Slack, like, this is incredible. And now we're talking about, hey, like, how do we staff someone at that event next year? So I think making sure that you're diversifying, if you work in the space, the accounts that you use can be really helpful.
You're not getting too much Lakers content on your For You page? Is that true?
Not, not
unfortunate. Tom, what about you? Any brands that inspire you outside the overtime umbrella?
I definitely am more obsessed with like individual creators than like overall brands. And I think two things that I love to do. One, I actually love to look at non-sports creators because I find that I learn a lot like for what we could do. And it's like, okay, this person has a format or an idea. What's like the sports version of that, or what's like the different vertical for that? But I just think it's such a cool platform. Like I was looking right before this, there's a guy who I followed. I just happened to stumble across his account like 10 days ago. He had just made his account on January 2nd. So 23 days ago, he already has 300,000 followers. He's just a normal dude who like tells story about his life while he's cooking. And like, he didn't ever plan on blowing up or like having like this whole thing. He's like the funniest dude in the world. And he didn't even know it probably. So I love finding people like that. And I find inspiration when it comes to that, and we've been so obsessed with finding talent and finding all these creators. And it's like, a lot of times it's just like, is that person cool? Like, is that person funny? And then it's like, oh, like we can work with that. So as far as specific people, I still am like such a big basketball fan at heart. So like any of those, I love finding like the high school kid or the kid who just started college who is like working for their school and is making like sick mixtapes of basketball players or sick edits. And I find so much inspiration just in like that and just looking at the younger creators. They're like just so far ahead usually than everyone else.
I'll get you guys out of here on this final question. I'll start with you, Tom. People that are debating, like, should I put staff, resources? I think we even find from Fortune 500 brands, like, we just don't know how we would even do it or how our brand would show up. Like, what would be your consultant advice on just the people that are kind of in the gray area?
Yeah, I always think you should get on TikTok. Like if you're a brand, if you're a company, like I do think that everyone needs to be on there. As far as staffing it, I don't think you have to be obsessed with like, are they a social, who spends the most time on TikTok? Like if they're spending a lot of time on that, I'm confident they can figure it out. They love it. If they have passion about it. I do like, obviously I think social, like people who work in social, it's going to be easier for them to pick it up and be able to learn stuff. But like, you know, the person at Overtime who is the best at TikTok, she is the person that's spending the most time on it, cares the most about it, and is like obsessed with every trend and obsessed with learning more about it. And the people who aren't as successful, you can tell it's just like not their thing. So I think you know pretty early if you love it. It's just like anything in life. If you love it, you're probably gonna be better at it.
And I think, Kaitee, where brands, in my opinion, get hung up on is they think they need this 75-page launch strategy with the content buckets and the who we are and the North Star. And I think you can just go in there and be in the sandbox for a bit and just play around and see how your brand can show up.
Yeah, I think if you're gonna, have a meeting with 25 different stakeholders about what it should be, right? Like you're gonna delay learning about the platform and growing on the platform. In terms of resource investment, I'm biased. I could not be a bigger proponent of like going to your marketing department, going to your content department and saying, hey, like what's our budget for maybe like paid for this particular campaign or for this quarter? Can we carve off X amount of that to even like to hire a freelancer who, to Tom's point, spends a lot of time on the platform? You wouldn't believe like the volume and the value you can get from just working with someone who is spending a lot of time on the platform and has that curiosity and that high motor. So yeah, I mean, to anyone who's in a position of still trying to make that case for investment, send them the webinar and and good luck to you, and know that like it is a little bit of a journey. I think Tom and I we've been in the industry a long time, and so we know that it does take some time to really.
What's funny is honestly what changed it in our industry, in my opinion, was the 50 and above year olds. Their kids started going on the platform, and then they would come like, "Hey, Katie, what's this TikTok thing? We should like think about that." I saw that happen a lot with brands. Oh, now it makes sense. So that's funny.
I told a guy recently, he's just started a company, and he's like, "What should I do for our TikTok?" I was like, "Just give it." He had a 17-year-old son. I was like, just talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it didn't click until just now, but I mean, I feel like we all should be paid by TikTok for this amazing infomercial that we've created for them. But no, I think it's been great for you guys, obviously, to expand your audience and expand the reach of your amazing brands. And then obviously we've just seen so much success on it as well. But thank you so much, both of you, for taking the time out of your busy schedules to not only join me, but also just provide like value to our community and our network. We really appreciate it.
Of course. Happy to do it. Thanks for having us.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, team. And then just so everybody knows, on the webinar right now, we are going to be sending everybody that registered for the webinar a copy of this video. We'll send you the deck as well. And then if you ever are looking for more advice or how to start it, or just anything that you want to get more deep into here at STN, we're happy to hop on those calls and chat about as well. So thank you everybody so much for joining us this afternoon, the 14 proven ways to crush it on TikTok. Hope you guys crush it in 2023. Cheers.